All right, the Industrial Revolution. Probably the biggest, or it is the biggest fundamental change that's going to happen to our world in the past, or since the 1750s. Because think about this: everything was being made in small quantities before. You didn't have mass consumption. You didn't have a lot of stuff because there wasn't a lot of stuff. Well, that's going to change here, and all the effects of that are widefold. So whether that's energy, you have new energy forms, new organizations, new economics, and new transportation methods. Everything is going to be fundamentally changed. Well, how do we get here? Okay. So you also have an agricultural revolution here where you're going to start seeing an increase in the food supply, you're going to see an increase in disposable income, and a population increase as well. You'll see an increase in productivity and technological development as a whole because what you're doing is you're moving from handmade industry to now machines. So this is going to start in Britain. It's going to start in Britain. One of the reasons is Britain was running out of wood. Britain was running out of wood, but they did have good banking and financial institutions, rivers and canals, coal mines, a lot of people living there, and a pretty strong economy as a whole. And I mean, that coal cannot be overstated. Great Britain had one of the largest sources of coal in the world. They had an incredibly skilled labor force, and which gets them to be expandable iron production the whole time. China, which was also one of the other strongest economies in the world at the time, did not have the geographical advantages of Britain. And so with that, you start to see the British are only going to be increasing in power during this time period. Why? The Industrial Revolution is going to start there. Okay. The sugar market had paid for a lot of things. Then the sugar market is going to be huge because England has places all over the world. I mean, they have hegemony all over the place, and so a lot of stuff is going to be paid for with sugar, and it's just huge. I mean, and so they put the Calico Acts of on textiles to make sure that Indian textiles did not beat out British textiles in the 1720s and 1721. And this is going to allow for the spinning industry to take over. In 1733, John Kay has the flying shuttle, which speeds up the weaving process and increases the demand for thread. Um, excuse me. And it's just a mule, which was a steam-driven way to do thread. We could do about 100 times the work of a person doing it. Cotton is only going to grow then, and it's about 40% of the British exports in 1830 are cotton, and they're turning almost all that into thread. James Hargreaves is going to invent the spinning jenny. Edmund Cartwright in 1785 is going to have water-driven powered looms. So textiles, thread is going to dominate this era. And what you have is the British dominate. And because the British have all the cotton that they can turn into thread, political stability, their colonial power, all the capitalism laws that are in place, they're ready to go. And they're going to take off and really become the economic power of the world. So, some other inventions. You have James Watt with the steam engine. He was an instrument maker at the University of Glasgow in modern day Scotland and burned coal to boil water to create steam. And he's really the first one to create this steam engine. By 1800, there were more than 1,000 of them in use. Guess what they're in? Textiles, because the textile industry is just going, 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 going. They find a better way to make iron with coke, which is a purified form of coal, which is cheaper than charcoal, and it helps with deforestation. More production, price of iron falls, just produce more. The thing you're going to find here is you just have a snowball effect in this whole time period. Once one thing happens, it's just going to cause the other one to keep growing and growing and growing. Bessemer in 1865, the refined blast furnace for steel, so it's harder and stronger and more resilient than ever before. And guess what? It's made cheaper than ever before. And one of the big parts of this is that the transportation networks are going to start to move all this stuff coal, textiles, and George Stephenson, the first steam powered locomotive, railroads. Fundamental to this whole process here, folks. 13,000 miles of railroads are going to get laid between the 1830 and 1870, linking raw materials to factories, to people, the rivers for steamships. Transportation networks are going to grow throughout Europe. They're only going to grow, and they're growing in Britain. Coal, getting to factories. I'm going back here to this slide because I think it's important. Coal is getting to the factories, and then the products are getting out from there. It's all due to machines, folks. It's all due to the machines with this factory system. Guilds are getting left out. This putting out system that had been in place before this, it's gone. The machines are too big. Machines are too big, so factories, which are just centralized production points where workers are coming together. Well, there had also been a movement in England, which is fundamental to this process. It's called the enclosure movement. Farms were getting bigger, so farmers were getting put out of work. So where are they going to move? To wherever the factories are. And because the factories had new jobs, you have this new, and people needed work, so they are a cheap labor source. And so all the cotton production moving, all the thread, all the textiles getting produced in the factories, and that's where basically your cities are going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. Farmers are getting kicked off of their land. All the machines are now in the cities, and that's where they all were. So you have a new owner class that starts to develop of people, and you have people start developing, earning a wage instead of selling things all the time. Each worker in this factory was a very specialized job. Part of that is due to Eli Whitney's invention of interchangeable parts, where where if a part broke down, you just could change it out for something else. Now, conditions in these factories were not the best. Rural people were used to working by the season and the sun dictating hours. Well, now guess what? You're working inside. So factories would work you 6 days a week for 12 to 14 hours. No real breaks, no safety precautions, because none of that existed. In other words, life for a lot of people got worse. One of the peoples who speaks out against this is a group called the Luddites, who were led by King Lud, whose real name was Nels Luddite. And basically, they went around, they destroyed textile machines. In other words, people fought against this big time. They're wearing masks, operated tonight. They get captured in 1813. The movement dies out very quickly, but it's just get the fact that people aren't that happy with this. Yes, we are producing more stuff than ever, but people aren't that happy with it. But the effects of it are still going. Things are getting cheaper. Things are getting produced more, and it's spreading. The British government did what it could. They did not want it out of Britain. It's going to start in about 1750. It only takes place in Britain there for about 50 years, but people start to realize they can make a lot of money here. And it happens that people are going to bribe and kidnap people. That's how it's going to spread. It's going to spread. And mainly spreads due to railroads. The Napoleonic Wars got rid of a ton of trade barriers, and Belgium is producing coal, iron, textiles, glass, and armaments. France sees a ton more people start to work, 150,000 skilled laborers to work with textiles and metallurgy, and railroad construction just keeps spurring it further and further. Now, Germany, it's going to be a little bit slower due to the fact you have them unifying during this time period. But the railroad networks that Bismarck helped build continue to help it grow. It's going to spread to the United States. The United States has a huge benefit with this, that they're on the other side of the ocean. So it takes a little more time, but once they get there, and the fact that it's under one government and a ton of natural resources, it takes off in the 1820s. They are building leaps and bounds. Now, the other part of this is that the guild system and internal trade are just going to get rocked. Okay? Guilds, internal trade barriers, going to get rocked. Guilds are basically going to be gone because they couldn't keep up with the machines at the time period. It was such large investments for people, it couldn't happen anymore. It just is going to help that some of the industries are just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger with time. Internal trade barriers are dismantled because people want to make more money. All right, so let's go back over here. So what this whole foundation here, you go from a rural society in England where you're now going to move to basically we're starting to urbanize. And why are people doing this? Because they needed jobs. And so when this happens, guess what? Here come those jobs. Here comes a cheap labor source. And Britain was just perfect for us all to happen. And here are all those reasons that they were perfect for this to happen. The new inventions of the time period just caused this to continue to grow and continue to grow and continue to grow to the point where you're now in a factory system for any manufactured goods. Still true today. That machine, you're not producing products in factories anymore. You're producing them in a house. Or I'm sorry, not in a house, in a factory, because a house just flat out wasn't big enough anymore. People are resisting against this. And lastly, it spreads throughout basically all the rest of Europe and over to the United States.